I feel that I see the connection with the American people and my husband, and he created a movement.
One of the most controversial promises of Trump's presidency was quickly enacted, slapping steep tariffs on America's trade partners. Mexican and Canadian imports were hit with a 25% tax, while goods from China faced a 10% levy. The message was unmistakable: America first. Trump framed the decision as a necessary step to protect American jobs and to hold foreign nations accountable, particularly for their alleged role in the fentanyl crisis, a key theme in his campaign. However, the international response was far from cooperative. Many saw the tariffs not as protective policy, but as economic aggression. No country took it more personally than Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's newly elected president known for her firm stance and independent leadership, swiftly condemned the move. She warned that the tariffs would damage both economies, drive up inflation, cost American jobs, and strain bilateral relations. But her response didn't stop at strong words. In a bold and strategic countermeasure, President Sheinbaum struck where it hurt, severing Mexico's long-standing reliance on Boeing. For decades, Mexican airlines had relied heavily on Boeing aircraft, including models like the 737 and the 787 Dreamliner. That changed almost overnight. Sheinbaum redirected Mexico's aviation contracts to Airbus, Boeing's European competitor. This was more than a shift in suppliers, it was a powerful political statement. Citing the prohibitive cost of Boeing jets due to the tariffs, Sheinbaum highlighted Airbus's competitive pricing, long-term support, and even a proposal to open a factory in Mexico. She framed the deal as a declaration of national sovereignty. Mexico would not be intimidated by U.S. economic coercion. The impact was immediate and severe. Already under pressure over safety and production issues, Boeing took a major hit, not just financially, but in terms of global reputation. Losing Mexico as a key market symbolized more than a business loss, it marked a broader geopolitical shift. European leaders celebrated the move. The German Chancellor called it a victory for European innovation, while Airbus executives hailed it as proof that the world was beginning to move beyond American economic dominance. Back in Washington, Boeing urged the White House to respond. Some called for lifting the tariffs in an effort to regain Mexico's business, while others advocated for doubling down. In response to Mexico's stunning pivot toward Airbus, the Trump administration quickly floated the idea of retaliatory tariffs on Airbus itself, a move meant to shield the U.S. aviation industry. Ever defiant, Trump even hinted at broader tariffs on European imports, raising the stakes and risking a full-scale trade war. Meanwhile, Boeing scrambled to recover, slashing prices, offering aggressive incentives, and even considering opening a factory in Mexico. But none of these options were easy or enough. The company was cornered, and the world was paying attention. What began as a dispute over aircraft had transformed into a global power struggle. Mexico's defiance sent a clear signal: U.S. economic dominance was no longer unshakable. Other nations took note, and Trump's aggressive trade agenda was beginning to face real pushback. Europe, for its part, steadily expanded its hold on key markets, seeing an opportunity in America's growing isolationism. And many believed this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of Mexico's bold move raised urgent questions. Would Argentina partner with China in the energy sector? Might other Latin American countries start aligning with Europe or Asia, drifting away from Washington's influence? One thing was certain: Trump's tariff policies had ignited a global chain reaction. And the fallout had only just begun. This left observers to wonder: was Mexico's decision a courageous stand for sovereignty or a high-stakes gamble with serious economic risks? And what would Trump do next, double down or back off? The fight was far from over. For decades, Mexico had been one of Boeing's most loyal customers. If you've ever flown with Aeromexico, chances are you've flown in a Boeing 737 or a 787 Dreamliner, aircraft that formed the backbone of the country's aviation fleet. But that long-standing relationship unraveled almost overnight, triggered by Donald Trump's trade war. In early 2025, during his second term, Trump imposed a harsh 25% tariff on Mexican and Canadian imports. The result? Boeing planes suddenly became millions of dollars more expensive for Mexican airlines. What had once been a dependable business partnership turned financially unsustainable. Rather than yield to U.S. pressure, Mexico charted a new course. President Claudia Sheinbaum redirected the country's aviation contracts to Airbus, Boeing's chief European rival. Airbus capitalized on the opportunity, offering more competitive prices, long-term maintenance packages, and even proposing to open a production facility in Mexico. For Sheinbaum, this wasn't just about better deals, it was about asserting independence. Her administration made it clear, Mexico would not be bullied by American economic tactics. The shockwaves were immediate. This wasn't merely a lost contract for Boeing, it was a global embarrassment. Executives were stunned. They had assumed Mexico, a customer of decades, had no real alternatives. But the tariffs had driven them too far, and Airbus was more than ready to step in. The loss of Mexico was devastating, and even more alarming, it could set off a domino effect. If Mexico could walk away from Boeing, who else might follow? Could Canada be next? Would Asian airlines begin shifting to Airbus? The answer wasn't clear, but the fear inside Boeing's boardrooms was very real. European leaders, on the other hand, were jubilant. Germany's Chancellor hailed the move as a victory for European innovation, while Airbus executives celebrated their expanding global footprint. Back in Washington, Boeing urgently pleaded with the White House to intervene. Some company officials pushed for removing tariffs on Mexico in hopes of salvaging the relationship. Others suggested retaliating against Airbus with new tariffs to level the playing field. But either path carried risk. Rolling back tariffs might shatter Trump's strongman image. Retaliating against Europe could launch a full-blown trade war, driving even more countries toward Airbus. Trump now faced a corner he helped build. This wasn't about one aircraft deal anymore, it was a warning shot. Boeing's hold on the global aviation industry, once unshakable, was slipping. And the toughest pill to swallow? Much of the damage was self-inflicted, a direct consequence of the administration's economic brinkmanship. The aviation battle between Boeing and Airbus had entered a volatile new chapter. The key questions now loomed large: would Trump strike back at Airbus? Could Boeing recover from the blow? Or was this the beginning of a long-term decline in American aerospace dominance? One thing was undeniable: what began as a trade dispute had evolved into a high-stakes geopolitical standoff. Mexico's bold move could be seen as either a courageous stand for national autonomy or a reckless gamble that might backfire. The world was watching, and other nations were weighing their options. Meanwhile, Europe was already declaring victory in what it saw as a turning point in the global aviation war. And Trump, never one to take humiliation lightly, was being forced to reckon with the real-world consequences of his own policies. For decades, Boeing had been the pride of American industry. Now, with its reputation bruised and its market share threatened, the question was no longer whether a shift was happening, but how far it would go. For decades, Boeing stood as the untouchable titan of commercial aviation. It was the gold standard, flying millions of passengers around the globe and serving as one of America's most valuable exports. Its planes supported tens of thousands of American jobs and generated billions in revenue. But that dominance took a serious hit when Mexico walked away from Boeing in favor of Airbus. The tipping point? Trump's steep tariffs, which drove up the cost of Boeing aircraft by millions of dollars, costs Mexico had no interest in absorbing. Rather than bend to U.S. pressure, Mexico made a strategic pivot. Airbus offered more than just cheaper aircraft. They came with long-term maintenance packages, competitive pricing, and even floated the idea of building a production facility in Mexico. It wasn't just a smart economic decision, it was a political statement. Mexico was making it clear, if the United States chooses to make trade prohibitively expensive, we'll take our business elsewhere. Now, other nations are paying close attention. Longtime Boeing customers across Latin America, and even in Asia, are beginning to reconsider their loyalties. If Mexico could break from Boeing, why couldn't they? What's happening isn't just a loss of a single customer, it's the beginning of Boeing losing its grip on global dominance. And for Airbus, this is a monumental win. The rivalry between Airbus and Boeing has been fierce for years, with both giants competing fiercely for international market share. Boeing traditionally dominated in the Americas. But Mexico's departure has tipped the balance, and European leaders aren't hiding their satisfaction. The German Chancellor publicly celebrated the move, calling it a testament to European innovation. For Airbus, it's more than a business victory, it's a symbolic triumph over US economic influence. Back in Washington, the fallout is escalating. Trump is reportedly furious, interpreting Mexico's switch as a direct challenge to his economic agenda. He's already hinting at fresh tariffs, this time targeting Europe, possibly a 10% tax on EU imports. Such a move might disrupt Airbus's US market expansion and give Boeing a chance to rebound, but it comes with serious risks. Any retaliation from Europe could ignite a broader economic conflict, hurting American businesses well beyond the aerospace industry. Trump now finds himself in a difficult position: back down and risk looking weak, or escalate and trigger a trade war with far-reaching consequences. Either path is fraught with peril, and the larger truth looms large: the era of unquestioned American economic supremacy is being tested. This moment is about more than planes, it's about global influence. With Mexico breaking ranks, the message is clear: even the US's closest partners are willing to turn elsewhere. And if others follow, Boeing's decline could deepen into a long-term collapse of American leadership in aviation. Facing growing pressure, Boeing is now at a crossroads with no easy way forward. It has three options, none of them ideal. First, it could lobby the White House to reverse the tariffs. While that might reopen the door to the Mexican market, Trump views reversing course as weakness. Any perceived pressure from Boeing might backfire, worsening relations further. The second option is to slash prices to match Airbus. But while it might win back some deals, cutting costs too deeply would devastate profits and signal desperation, possibly prompting other countries to demand similar discounts. It's a slippery slope that could dig Boeing into a deeper financial hole. The boldest option? Build a factory in Mexico. Doing so would sidestep tariffs by producing planes locally. But the cost would be massive, implementation would take years, and the optics would be politically disastrous. Trump's trade policies were built on the promise of bringing jobs back to the US, not sending them abroad. A move like this could ignite a political firestorm and alienate Boeing from Trump's base. The stakes have never been higher. This is no longer about a single deal or even a single country, it's about Boeing's future and America's role in the global economy. If Boeing fails to regain its footing, Airbus could solidify its position as the dominant force in aviation. And a weakened US aviation industry could erode broader American influence across international markets. What began as a policy disagreement has exploded into a high-stakes global economic confrontation. Now the questions mount: will Trump retaliate further against Airbus? Can Boeing recover from this damaging blow? Or has Mexico's bold pivot triggered a seismic shift in the aerospace industry? One thing is certain: the fight is just beginning. Was Mexico's move a brilliant assertion of sovereignty or a reckless gamble that could backfire? And how will Trump respond? His next move could define not only Boeing's fate but the direction of US trade strategy in an increasingly multipolar world.